It's off exit 10, presented by Capital District Sport and Fitness.
And Jake, can you turn me up in headphones a little bit?
Test.
Yeah, we're good.
Are you Eminem right now?
Are your ears blown out?
My ears aren't good.
high up.
Ask Sam. She yells at me because I'll play music in the kitchen. Blah blah blah. Yeah, my ears are fucking blown out. Yeah. so sorry.
It's also a good excuse. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. My ears are blown out. Oh no, I didn't hear that request.
Jay, just keep all this in because we're rambling. Let's just keep all that.
I gotta test myself though.
Yeah,
test,
just keep
okay.
Keep our test in the live recording. Yeah, because my fucking ears are blown out, but they may not be because this past year we have our daughter now. So, we killed the lights a lot earlier at night because she got to sleep. So I'll walk around and I'm like bumping into shit and I'm like, and Sam's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I can't see. I'm not a cat. And then she's like, go do an eye doctor appointment. And I was like, okay, I will. And like I went in. They did the thing. I'd never been before, Neal.
Mm-hmm. You'd never been to an eye doctor?
Never once in my life.
I don't think I've ever been to an eye doctor.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was like young and my mom made me go.
Wow.
Never went. So I didn't know the order of events or even what they're going to do. I just wanted to like prove to Sam that I was not blind, or I guess confirm that I was. So I go in, I see like an aide or a nurse, and they put the stuff in my eye. Go in the waiting room. The doctor's going to be able to see you in a little bit. I sit down, I whip out my phone, and I can't see a fucking thing.
Oh, because they dilated?
They dilated me. And they didn't tell me. They didn't do a good job explaining that's what they were doing to me. So then my like old man Italian brain goes, they just fucked up my eyes. So then they would try to sell me on a pair of glasses or whatever. So I'm going to go in and the doctor's going to be like, can you see this? And I'm going to be like, no, not at all.
Not at all. Nothing.
I was so rattled, Neal.
Oh, I remember when I last got my eyes dilated, and it was like it just took forever for like it to settle out a little bit. So like my eyes kept on hurting, and like I couldn't like do anything. Mm-hmm. And it gets to you after like about the first 2 hours, like after like an hour or so, and you're like, is this going to be my life that I can't like read a book or I can't look at a computer screen? And this was when when I did a study abroad, I did a study abroad in Japan, and it's a 13-hour plane ride from New York to Japan. 13 hours is a long time, particularly if you're in coach. And it does weird things to your head. If you've ever gone on like a really long plane ride, you definitely know what I'm talking about. Because after the 6 hours, you no longer believe you're actually going to arrive anywhere. It's just like, this is my life. This is my life, staring at a seat in front of me forever. And I've been back and forth to Japan a couple times, and every time I'm always surprised when we actually land. I'm like, oh, it's done.
Yeah,
we're over.
13's big. Jay, what was your trip that you just did? How many hours in the air?
Longest flight was 7, and I would say after
7 was where to where?
Yeah,
New York to Norway.
Oh yeah. So it's like probably after about like 5 hours, you're like,
I was gonna say 5 or 6, which thankfully I only had a couple after that. But it's like,
yeah.
Ooh.
That gives you hope. But imagine like it's 5 or 6 and you're like, I have 7 more hours of this to go.
The physical discomfort would be intolerable for me. I was so uncomfortable.
I don't know how it is now. This was like a good 20 years ago, but like Japan Airlines is like really good. Really comfortable coach seats and things like that. Like you're okay. You have enough leg room. They give you really good food. They're always coming through with like giving you tea or water and things like that. So they make it as tolerable as possible. However, this was also when they had smoking and non-smoking sections. Oh, God. And I don't smoke. I never smoked. And one time on my flight back from Japan, apparently they stuck me in the worst possible seat, which was all the way in the back in the smoking section. So the seat didn't even recline because it's against the bulkhead. And the rule is that if you're smoking, you have to sit down. So you have all the people from the non-smoking section who are smokers coming back begging for seats. And I would just be like, yeah, take my seat. I'm going to stand up and walk around. Fortunately, I hadn't slept for like about probably a good 36 hours before I left because I was a college student. We all like partied to excess. So I was able to like pass out for a good 6 hours. But still, 13 hours is awful. And my wife and I want to go back to Japan, or I want to go back to Japan. My wife wants to go. I'm like, we'll have to save up because we're doing business class. I am not doing coach.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
I
like we
coach
did
for
we
Hawaii.
did we did Italy, which I think was 8 or 9 hours. Yeah, and I was like some fucking PMs and like melatonins to try to get through it.
I saw a video where it was this sort of ergonomic expert trying to explain how to sleep on a plane in coach. And it was like a good, like, it was like a Wired interview type of thing, like a Wired.com. And at the end of it, she had 4 different ways to fall asleep. And every single one of it is like, yeah, but you can't really do it in the coach. You don't have enough space. Like you can't lean forward. You can't lean back. You can't lean to the side. I'm like, this is awful. And my wife and I last year, we went to Prague. And at the last minute, spur of the moment, I was like, you know what, let's upgrade. You know, like we're going to go out. It's our first big vacation in a couple of years. Let's splurge on it. And it's amazing. Like totally made, like it's like the highlight of our vacation is flying business class to our vacation. And I'm like, oh, we can lay out and this whole thing. So yeah, we have to save up for future vacations so we can do this type of thing in the future.
Yeah, that's real. But okay, going back to the HPL. So we have Neal Sandin on tonight, and he's the owner of 643 Research. So you do market research.
Yes.
It's the best way to put it. How'd you get into this field?
I fell into it completely by accident. The story is basically I got my undergraduate at Guilford College, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to North Carolina to go to school, very small school. I got my degrees in religious studies and international studies because I wanted to go to Japan, and to do international studies major, you had to double major. And I did religious studies so I could learn about like Buddhism and Taoism and all that sort of Confucianism and stuff like that. And afterwards, I got my graduate degree at the New School doing international affairs because I had dreams of working at the UN. And I probably didn't do enough research. As a market researcher now, I cringe because I didn't really do enough research about how to work at the UN. The only thing I really saw was like, oh, you need a master's degree to really qualify for these positions. And so I was like, all right, so I'll do that. And the New School's a good school, and they have an international affairs program, which just started. We'll do that. And I got in. And I finished that. I graduated there about 2005. And I actually did an internship at the UN, which was really great. But one thing I realized is that the UN has several official languages, and Japanese is not one of them, nor is German, because Japan and Germany lost World War II. And so hence they are not official languages. So like,
When did this hit you? Like, oh shit, this path I'm taking, I'm going to dead end myself.
Actually,
right here.
when I was doing the internship, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Because I'm meeting all these people, and it's like really amazing people that you meet, like people who speak like 5 different languages and who are like getting their PhD and this, that, and the other
Dude,
thing.
as you meet people outside of our country, like I feel like it's the norm to be bilingual. I mean,
yeah.
We have friends from Spain and France who Sam met through field hockey camps. I remember we went out to the Chat and Brew once with them, Paul, and we're sitting there with a guy from Spain, Italy, and France. The guy from Spain could speak all of the languages, and the other guys were okay in English and then could speak their native language. So our friend from Spain was like going back and forth, like English and French and English and Italian and Spanish. And I was like, this is it's to date the most impressive thing that I've ever seen, Neal.
That's wild.
I am actually listening to a book called The Power of Language. This is it's written by a psychiatrist about what being bilingual or multilingual does to the brain. And it's amazing. Not only can it there's some strong evidence that it helps postpone like neurological degenerative effects like from old age, such as like Alzheimer's or dementia, if you know multiple languages, but it also helps increase creativity and increases like sort of what they call executive function. So you sort of being able to better manage your own thoughts and manage others around you. It's completely amazing. And people who know like 3, 4, or like these hyper polylingual individuals, I just can't. I envy them so much. Like I really want to get there.
Yeah, me too, Paul. Slide that mic a little closer, Neal. I just want to to the right a little bit. I'm sure we're good, but
There we
go. Is there
Mike's just deaf. It's okay.
Yeah, I guess my ears are getting worse.
I've heard his ears are shot.
Is there a critical period, though, you think, where after you pass a certain age, it's going to be much harder to learn a secondary language?
I know that's sort of common knowledge, but I actually would say no. I learned Japanese in college, and I got to a pretty decent conversational level, where I could have, like, I made very good, deep friendships. I, had romantic and platonic relationships with people who only spoke Japanese. It was really sort of opened up my world. I'm actually yesterday, I just started taking Japanese classes again. And I fully think that adults can learn these other languages. It may take more time management because, you're working, you have jobs and things like that. And it's also, you're fighting against certain habits because you might be thinking only in English.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, probably.
Absolutely.
You're like wired so strongly.
Wired really strongly. And there's like a desire, and I'm totally guilty of this, of wanting to make them like a straight translation.
Right.
Of like, oh, hola means hello, and gato means cat, and that can happen. That's good to a degree, but after a while, you kind of need to start thinking in that language.
I feel like that's how you're taught in school, though, is these strict translations.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
but I firmly believe, because I think as an adult, and I've read this in books as well, about acquiring other languages. As an adult, you actually have an advantage because you know grammar. You know the parts of language. You know what a noun is. You know what a verb is. You know what an adjective is. And you can think with those concepts. And even if there are like different language families. So for example, like in Japanese, to plan, like I plan to go to the gym. Plan is a noun. So it's like I go to the gym plan is how it's sort of structured. And so it's a noun. So, but you can still think with it. It's like, oh, that's a noun, and that's how I treat it. And then you can sort of think with it and then move on from there.
Right.
But I absolutely think that, like, people, no matter what your age, you can certainly pick up at least part of the language. It does require diligence. And also you have to consider like how we know English. Like we're confronted with English every waking hour, basically. Like we're reading English, we're hearing English, we're thinking in English. So if you want to learn another language, you need to immerse yourself somehow in that other language, whether it be Spanish, French, Japanese, whatever, as much as possible to just kind of get that. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge. Because when you're a kid, particularly if you're like in an international school, or, you may be like interacting with other people from like other nationalities, immigrants and whatnot like that, then you can get that greater sense of immersion than when you're an adult, where you tend to be a little bit more like, I'm with my family now, or I'm with my roommates now. And so it's a little bit more isolated. But that being said, I don't think there's anything within the brain that prevents you from learning another language.
It's just about rigidity in yourself.
It's just
exactly
the lifestyle that you have, and the fact that anything to learn you have to be consistent with.
Exactly.
So it's like, how consistent do you really want to be to learn the language? And with something like that, you have to be very consistent.
Very consistent.
Because what countries were you just in, Jay?
Yeah, Norway, Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, and I got away with speaking English to every single person I came across.
I mean, boom, that's it. When we were in Italy, I walked around and I was like, every single person they interact with, they obviously, their Italian is their native language, but they all can talk to me in English just fine.
And that's also a big part of it. Like, I'm guessing you probably interacted with people in urban centers, like whether it be like Rome or Naples or whatever.
Yeah, we were in Amalfi Coast.
Yeah.
And Rome. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I remember we were in, my wife and I went to Amsterdam. And so everybody speaks English better than me, no accent. It's brilliant. But we asked the hotel, I'm like, hey, where's a place that we can go eat? Because we try to eat, we don't want to eat at McDonald's or American type style restaurants. We want to eat at like Dutch, eateries. And so they're like, oh yeah, if you go down and up a road, there's a really good place. And we went there, and it was the first place that people were like, oh, I don't understand a thing. And they only spoke Dutch. And it was a great restaurant, but it was really interesting because they didn't have an English menu for us or anything like that. So it's interesting. So I bet you if you went 10 miles outside of, the Amalfi Coast or Rome or whatnot like that, you'd probably meet people that didn't speak a lick of English, or maybe beyond like hello. And Would you like a drink of water? Like
Yeah.
probably some real basic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But okay, so you get to this internship.
Oh, yeah,
in the
so
UN. Yeah, and then you're like, oh fuck, like
But I was still sort of determined to do it because at the time, I was really keen on doing things. This will sound very highfalutin and whatnot, but I was really into nuclear disarmament. It's something like, I still consider, like, I know there's a lot of issues in the world, but I still consider like nuclear disarmament like the biggest unexamined and ignored problem that we have in the world today, because every other problem can be fixed. But if you have a nuclear war, that can't be fixed. That's done.
what year did this first? How old were you when this first went into your head? You're like,
This was like 2004, 2003. So I don't know. How old was I at the time? Jeez. I was, I guess, mid-20s or something like that. I had been, when I was in Japan, I did go to Hiroshima to see that. And that is sort of like, if you go there, it is like time standing still. You go and you see the epicenter. You can stand where the epicenter was, and it's like haunting. And then you go into the museums and you see, the artifacts and the remnants and the artifacts that have come from it, and it's haunting. And as an American, particularly, like you feel like a sense, or I did. I felt like a sense of like heaviness with it. And I was with a Japanese friend of mine who took me there. She was super sweet, very accommodating, everything like that. But that sort of really drove home, like, there really is no coming back from a nuclear war, full stop. And we have more nuclear weapons on this planet than, could blow up the planet nuclear times over.
Listen, any given week in the news now, you see North Korea and China and Russia and us, obviously.
Exactly. And I think it was like 2006 that North Korea successfully tested a nuclear weapon, which I wrote an article about. And so I was very keen on that. And so after I graduated, with my master's. I worked with some nonprofits, like doing nuclear disarmament work. But I found that it was like...
But what goes into that?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's not a grassroots thing to do nuclear disarmament. Like, you're focusing on the governments. The government, it's not like recycling or something like that, where it's like, oh, okay, everybody should start recycling more. Or it's not like solar panels, where let's put solar panels on our roofs to lessen our dependence on fossil fuels. Like, that's sort of a grassroots initiative. With nuclear weapons, it's government only. And I want to stress, like, I'm not against nuclear power. I think nuclear power has terrific potential.
Right. I think there's just not education in that.
Difference between nuclear power and a nuclear bomb.
Nuclear bomb is a different story altogether. So anyway, these organizations were trying to basically lobby various governments. But honestly, what's called the Big Five, which is the Big Five nuclear powers, the UK, the US, I think France, Germany, Israel is an undeclared, because they don't acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons, but it's basically assumed that they do. I think it was it, and there was others as well. It's more than five. India, Pakistan, China, South Korea. I'm sorry, not South Korea. South Africa gave up their nuclear weapons back, I think, in like 1991, I'm guessing. But that being said, they are basically lobbying these, and there's no real political pressure for them to do this. They're like, no. And there's nothing to be done. It's not like really a political thing. There's no, when you think about the upcoming presidential election, it's going to happen in 2024, or the last one that happened in 2020, nuclear weapons never came up at all. Like, it's coming up a little bit now, just a little bit, because of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. But it's not that America should give up their nuclear weapons. It's that we should use nuclear weapons in this war.
Right. Isn't there some, I don't want to misspeak. You or even Jordy would probably speak better to me on this. Isn't there some agreement, though, that if somebody launches one, like, they have to let it be known, or is that false?
Oh, there probably is. There probably is. But honestly, if you launch one, you're
it's
going to know.
It's like coming. Yeah.
You're going to know.
Yeah. So anyway, this is all a bit of a tangent. So I did an internship after I graduated, and it paid a tiny bit of money with this nonprofit that's doing nuclear disarmament. And while I was there, I saw like job postings because I was looking for work because I was broke and I needed to pay rent. And I was living in New Jersey, which is expensive. And I noticed that people with PhDs were fighting over a job that paid like $26,000 a year.
That's what's crazy about education right now.
And I was like, I cannot afford a job that pays $26,000 a year. And these people have PhDs. I only have my master's. Like I can't even compete. So I just started applying just in general, anywhere. And I landed at this company that does market research. And they brought me in. And because the owner's son had gone to a school at the UN or sponsored at the UN, and they saw that I interned at the UN, I got the job. And so I started in market research. And that was like 2007 or so. And I started off as a project manager. And I had almost no experience with market research. I had done a little bit of freelancing when I was at graduate school, which was actually pretty interesting. I did some freelancing helping with market research regarding the Afghanistan constitution. Like basically, like how do you write a constitution that incorporates all of Afghanistan? Like what are the cultural ins and outs of it? We did some work in the Philippines and stuff like that. But beyond that, like I hadn't really done like market research at all. And I didn't really have a firm idea of it. And they threw me in and were like, okay, so you're managing these 5 projects, have at it. And they didn't blow up in my face. And then like 3 months later, they sent me off to Germany. Do I speak German? No, of course not. And for like 2 weeks to do a business development thing with them. And it was a whirlwind. I literally went from north to south, east to west of Germany. Like it was just a zigzag whirlwind tour. And I did that and I came back. And then one day, gets to where I am now. I was managing a project and it was a focus group. And with a focus group, you have a moderator who helps run the project. And the moderator that we had was like, I can't do it that day. And the project was happening the next day. And so I basically just raised my hand. I'm like, I guess I'm moderating this. And that was my first step in it. And I've been basically doing that ever since like 2007. So
you just said, I'm up?
Yeah, basically. Like nobody else could do it.
Do you feel like your personality just fit to be able to, okay, now I have a group of people, I got to sit down, I got to mix it up, I got to ask questions? Or was that something you had to learn and perfect as you got going?
You know, it's an interesting question. I do feel like I am like I can read people well, and I certainly don't ever want to make somebody upset. So I try to be very sympathetic. What's that?
I'm so mad right now.
I try to be like sympathetic and empathetic to people. I like really do try to be careful with the words I use, not trying to upset them. But at the time, I actually was really shy. And so getting in front of a group, like my hands would shake and I would be like super nervous. And like 9 times out of 10, the group was like super sweet. They were really nice. They're like, hey, yeah, welcome. And I would talk to them and they sort of welcome the participants that you have there sort of welcome you in because they want to have a good time too. They don't want to have an awkward time. So it's sort of like we're on the same team in that regard. And, you know, generally the groups went well. It was actually when was it? It's probably like about when I was like 33 or something like that I got over my shyness when I realized something really key.
What?
Which was people will never get upset with you if you ask light, harmless questions. So in other words, you go up to somebody and say, man, it's really hot today, isn't it? Nobody gets upset about that. They're like, yeah. And they start relating to you. Or, oh, this looks really interesting. Or, oh, I like your shoes. Like light, harmless, nothing weighted, no ulterior motive. Nobody gets upset about that. And previous to that point, I had always assumed that people would get upset with me for bothering them. And that was sort of a false shyness. And so once I realized that people don't really mind if you just go up and sort of be like, oh, I like your headphones. Or, oh, you know, that's a nice headband you're wearing. Like, it just works really well. And that might be, I do want to paraphrase, might be because I'm male. It might be because I'm, you know, a white male. Like that, all those factors come into it. Like, you know, there are other factors that may not work for other people. But for me, that sort of got over my shyness. And then as a result, I was like, okay, I can just talk to people.
Well, I'm always interested because I relate to somebody who would, I suppose, like categorize yourself as an introvert, was shy and anxious and quiet during your upbringing, and now you're making a living off of talking with people.
Yeah.
Because I never would raise my hand in class. I was fucking terrified to say anything. I was just shy. I don't know fully where that comes from. My parents were quiet. I had anxiety. And now we're talking on a podcast, or God knows how fucking long this is going to be. I talk to people for 12 hours a day, and I enjoy it. But it was kind of, I suppose, just immersing myself in this field and kind of learning where I fit in and building confidence as you talk to people.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it could be, like, I wouldn't say it's just was that one realization that did it. It was probably like a buildup of a lot of other things that got me to a point that I'm like, and that was like sort of the tipping point, so to speak. But I would say, like, I describe myself as an introvert, but I can also describe myself as like a gregarious introvert. Like, I like talking to people, but I need to take a break afterwards.
Yeah.
So recently, like I had some family visiting, and they came by, and they were great. It was a nice little visit. And then like the next like day and a half, I just kind of need to be by myself to like sort of recharge. While I know people who are like shy extroverts who like don't want to make that first step. They don't want to go and make that first step to break the ice. But once they do,
They're out.
they are with you and you can't get rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah, we all know those people.
Yeah. So it's like they're a person like standing here and like, it's like, oh, and Paul will say something like, oh, hey, why don't you come over here? It's like, oh yeah, I love this exercise. And they'll just start talking your ear off. So it's like introvert and extrovert, I don't think necessarily means that they're like shy or gregarious. It's more of like, for me, like I like talking to people, but I need to take a break.
Yeah, I think knowing about that about yourself is important, though.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the
Social
day,
battery.
yeah, Sam knows, like, when I get home, like, there goes Mike with his routine.
Yeah.
Like, don't interrupt Mike with his routine. He's just decompressing right now.
Yeah.
And when he's done with his routine, he'll be here. But
Banging into shit because he can't see. Sam's yelling at him because he can't hear shit.
Can't hear stuff. It's like, no, it's just I'm decompressing. Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I first started talking to you and hear about what you did, I related it very much what we do here with the semi-private model. Right, you're in the gym in the mornings. You may have 5, 6, 7 different people. Everybody's different. They got different backgrounds, different programs, different interests, different things they want to talk about. And here I am. I have to survey the room. I have to choose who needs the most attention right now. I have to know what to talk to each person about. And all of a sudden, it's like you're hosting this weird-ass dinner party with people that would never, ever be together except for this moment that we're in.
Yeah, that's exactly like how I think of like market research, particularly like focus groups. Like, oh, we're going to be talking about washing machines for 2 hours. You know how hard it is to make that interesting for 2 hours?
I remember you telling me about you had to ask questions about like what do you use a printer for?
Yes.
And it couldn't just be like simple answers.
I'd be like, Neal, I printed 3 things today.
I print things, yeah. No, it's kind of amazing, like what you can use printers for. Like it's all sorts of interesting nuances.
I don't want to know what
realize.
some people use printers for.
But it's a factor of getting back to your thing. I have my own methods of sort of creating rapport with somebody because I have, with the market research, particularly focus groups or in-depth interviews. By the time I'm talking to somebody, let's say I have an interview with Paul, just a one-on-one interview, an in-depth interview with Paul. By the time I speak to Paul, at least $300 has been spent just to get him here in front of me, and that's not including my fee at all.
This is interesting. So you have to make the most use of Paul.
Yes, I have an hour and a half or whatever, an hour and a half.
You're not giving an hour and a half, Paul.
Honestly, for a one-on-one interview, an hour is better, but sometimes it goes on for an hour and a half. But
With Neal, I could probably do an hour and a half.
Yeah, so I have it in my head, like you have my fee that they're still paying, and then there's additional fees that come into play. But just to get him sitting in a chair over Zoom or whatnot is at least like $300. It's been spent, full stop. And so I have to, and then I only have an hour and a half to get through like pages and pages of questions. So creating that rapport really quickly is really important, because it was basically just two strangers that would never talk to each other in normal circumstances.
Yeah, and you have an hour, and you got to maximize him answering your questions. If he's like, "This guy's weird, I don't want to talk to him," he's withdrawn.
Yeah, if he shuts down, if I ask him questions and he's just like, "Yeah, it's fine," I'm like, "Okay, great." Yeah, like 2-word, 1-word answers.
Yeah, okay, because in here, I ask a kid, you have to be more specific. If I ask a kid, "How's your day?"
Yeah.
It was good.
Good.
It's fine. That's like, I want more than fine. So I need to ask a better question than, how was your day?
I look at it in a different way.
Okay.
I look at it as in what makes people open up is if they see in me what they see in themselves. So in other words, like, you know, you do like a kind of an introduction, you know, like, oh, you know, like, my name's Neal, I'm 46 and a half years old, I'm this, I'm that, and that. And you pull something from that to let them know that, like, I do that too, or I have that too. So in other words, they no longer feel like they're by themselves, that they have somebody that is similar to them, at least in this one thing. So in other words, what they see in themselves, like, you know, like they're there and they're like, all right, I'm here for 2 hours. I'm going to get paid like whatever, $150 to answer this Yahoo's questions. All right, I'll sit here and do it. But if I can say like, oh, you just had a kid. Well, you look remarkably well rested. I'm very impressed. Like and they're like, oh yeah, you know, like he at least empathizes with my state, because, you know, having a kid is, you know, being up at crazy hours. Or, oh, you've been to Paris too. I've been to Paris. That's great. Where have you gone? Or something that makes it so that they're not their own silo, that they're not by themselves. So what they see in themselves, they see in you. And if they do that, then that's the pathway that communication can happen. And so that creates that rapport really quickly. I remember I had an interview with a fellow. This was a face-to-face interview, and it was with a retired police officer from New York City. And he was like a cop during like the early 90s, late 80s, when Times Square was not.
So he was a hard-nosed guy,
Yeah.
I would assume.
He was hard-nosed. Like he comes in and I don't know if you ever get this impression, like you feel like there's a wall right there. Like there's this tough guy wall, and he's like, for some reason I always get in my mind that all his muscles are tensed and he's just flexing right there, and he's just looking at you really hard. And that's not good for an interview. I can't do that. So, you know, get him talking. I'm like, oh yes, I remember that in New York City. I remember that I saw some crazy stuff too. Oh, okay. And we started chatting, and a good 10 minutes of the interview was just on that. Had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but it was just to get him so he was willing to talk to me, because what he saw in himself, he saw in me, and therefore it became okay for him to tell me what he actually thinks and what he does. And you guys actually do that too. I've seen like how you do it. Like you're talking to people, you're relating to them, but it's sort of making the person not feel isolated and alone. If they feel isolated, particularly if you're in Zoom where everybody has in their squares, that's isolating.
You know where I've had a hard time with that? It's very rare in here that this happens or that it occurs is when somebody just wants to talk. I know you have a specific goal when you're talking with somebody. When somebody wants to talk politics and their political beliefs are on the complete opposite side of mine, that may be the only time I just fucking struggle in here.
I just divert. That's what I do every time.
Yeah, that's the fucking
I switch the
hardest,
conversation
Neal.
real fast.
Yeah, that is a tricky thing, because you want to divert it, but without them feeling like you cut them off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
That's the only time in here I leave a conversation and I go, the fuck? They're like that was just not pleasant
I feel like I just let them
whatsoever.
finish their thought, and then I turn the conversation to something else.
yeah,
Like I let them finish their thought, because I'm like,
Because,
me
like,
cutting you off is going to be worse.
Because, like, I want to share my perspective, but not get into this debate right now. But, you know,
yeah.
I got way too many things I got to do to do this debate right here.
Yeah, the advantage I have is that it's rare. It's not. There are a few projects that I've done that are political based.
hey, with that said, can you pour me up? That stressed me out a little bit.
Hey, Jordy, would you be so kind to grab my other cut water out of the fridge? Sure.
Neal, do you need to refill it all?
I'll take a little bit.
Here, take that. Jordy, do you want to grab anything? You good? I'm good. Okay.
So
yeah, let's all fill up right here. But yeah, Neal, that's like the rare time that I just
that
feel
good?
like not at ease or not successful in and having a conversation.
I think for me, what I do, and this is like, thank you.
Appreciate you.
The one thing that I try to do, and that's important, is that even if I vehemently disagree with them, like there are times where like I was going to do a focus group and a person came in and was wearing a political hat.
Mm-hmm. Can we guess the hat?
Can we guess the hat? Was it
It was
wait,
red.
Was it red?
It was red.
Did it have 4 letters on it?
Yes. And so, and I was like, we're not going to take this person. Not because of the hat per se, but that would be so distracting to the conversation.
Right.
That it would color the conversation. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And the fact that he was wearing that right off the bat, I'm like, I have a feeling he wants to derail the conversation for this point. And, honestly, if it was somebody wearing, I don't think they're like whatever Biden or others had a hat, but if they did, I would be like, this probably is not the right fit because I don't want to derail it to this sort of discussion, regardless of who one supports or not. I feel like it's a really key thing is to make it safe for them to have the opinions and then move on right there. So it's like sort of what Paul was saying, like let them say their piece. Like, okay, well, listen, not right now. What we're going to do is this.
That's pretty much how it goes. Like, literally.
You can't attack it directly because if you do it directly like this, well, that's what happens. You're at loggerheads. You're going to get that conflict. You're going to get, it's just never going to resolve in a way. It's not like I'm not going to change this person's mind.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This episode of Off Exit 10 is brought to you by Anchor and the all-new Anchor Pro, crafted to endure the most high-performance workouts without the high cost and space requirements of a standard cable machine. Named the best portable cable machine by Men's Health Home Gym Awards, Anchor provides the full functionality of a cable machine in one small space-saving unit. Designed with user-friendliness in mind, Anchor can simply be attached to any squat rack or placed on any wall in your home gym using its intuitive sliding track mount. With up to 65 pounds of resistance, Anchor is built for high speed and controlled exercises alike, from cable presses and rows to chops and lifts. The Anchor has been a game changer for us here at CDSF, and now you can enjoy the same professional quality cable machine in your own home gym by heading over to anchortraining.com and using code CDSF10 for 10% off your order today. Get all the benefits of a cable machine without the high cost and installation fees. Enjoy the portable luxury and space-saving performance of Anchor today by going to anchortraining.com and using code CDSF10 at checkout. That's anchortraining.com, promo code CDSF10 for 10% off your order today.
Going back to like what you were saying before with how you develop the rapport is, I've said it in here many times. You got to give a little to get a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I say that all the time. That's like something I did when I was in New York. It was like a motto I adopted. It was like, I have to give them something.
Yes.
For them to give me something. What the hell are they going to want to tell me if I don't tell them something about myself?
The field we're in, too, is interesting, Neal, because there's no real regulations. I don't know what your field is like. We can talk about that. But if you're a physical therapist or a teacher or an athletic trainer or a nutritionist, or you have a licensure process you have to go through. You have degrees you need. You have a board you need to take. You have standards that you need to maintain. This field doesn't have that. It's like the wild fucking West.
It's a lot like that with market research.
Yeah.
It's in business terms, like becoming a moderator, which is really where like my bread and butter, moderator, basically running focus groups, running in-depth interviews. Anybody can say they're a moderator. It's like being a photographer.
Right.
You have a camera? Oh, I'm a photographer.
It's like being a trainer. You can do a weekend course, or you could have a master's degree.
It's like being ordained. I can just do it online.
Exactly.
Cheers, Paul.
And
are you ordained, Paul?
I am. I had to do my sister's wedding.
hey,
So, hey,
Mazel tov. But yeah, it's exact. Yeah, particularly in my field and absolutely in yours as well. It's actually a big challenge for me because anybody says that they can be a moderator, and because what I do is basically what's B2B, it's business to business. So there's a lot more money that gets spent in business to business as compared to business to consumer, which is the field that you're in.
Right.
Business to business, the prices are generally a lot higher. If you ever like go online to like buy like a computer program, they'll say like, "Oh, are you a business?" And the price point is immediately like 10 times as high. That's how it is in business to business. So like market research, there's a lot of money that gets spent in it. And so that also works against me. So like I can be a moderator. I've been a moderator since 2007. So 16 years I'm bad at math.
Yeah, me too. I don't
That's
fucking
right.
want to do that.
16
That's the
years.
right number, 16.
16 years. So I've been doing it for 16 years. But people are very hesitant to try a new moderator because there's a lot of investment they have to do, even on like a small project. There might be thousands of dollars that goes into it. And if I don't do a good job as a moderator, they've lost a lot of money.
But how
they
do
might
you
have to redo it.
How do you educate businesses and separate yourself from, I have this level of experience, education, versus somebody that doesn't?
It's a lot of word of mouth. And it's just like a slow slog, I feel. Maybe other moderators have more luck. Like I'm sure there's a little bit of like nepotism and knowing who you know and things like that. I didn't know anybody in the field. So basically I worked as a moderator within a couple companies. And then when I went independent, one of my former employers hired me on as one of their main moderators. And because they knew me, they knew I did good work and they had the experience with me. And then this was before COVID, so there's a lot more face-to-face. So you go to various facilities, and I just make nice with the people. Just in general, like, because I want them to help me. I want them to help me and work with me and not just be, like sticklers. If you're a bit of a jerk, they tend to be like, all right, we're not doing that for you. But if you're nice, they will kind of go a little bit out of the way to help you out. So I, it's very nice to people. And eventually I'm like, oh, by the way, I went independent. Here's my card. If you want it, no rush. And it just became sort of a gradual buildup on those types of things.
How much of being successful in business, obviously you need periods where you hit and you get some money and you make some money and you put money away, is being able to just withstand what'd you say, the sludge?
Oh,
The
yes.
How much of it is being able to withstand that and keep going? Because people feel that resistance and they fold. And they get scared or they get nervous. They don't know how to deal with, I guess that
I feel like that's big in our industry for sure.
I think that's big in any industry.
But I feel definitely I've seen it.
Yeah.
As a head trainer in places.
I think no matter what, you're going to have like, there are going to be moments where things get really hot and like, oh, everybody's going to go do some physical training.
But I'm even saying with growth, like people want things. We were talking earlier with HBO that people want things easier, and I guess without effort, I have to sign out, I have to re-sign in, and I have to do this. And say you do some marketing efforts, your brain may want to reap those benefits tomorrow or next week, but you're not going to reap those benefits tomorrow or next week or next month. If you do it right, you'll reap them over time. But I feel like people then get disappointed, discouraged.
That's a really good point. For me, I always look at things like in a 6-month horizon.
Okay.
I don't expect anything to happen like in a week or 2 weeks. I mean, my industry, things go slow anyway. If I get a project now, I'm not going to get paid for it for probably 3 months, which is annoying, to be honest.
But that's how the industry works.
That's just how it is. That's the rules that they are. But I think there's a little bit of privilege in that. You make sure you have enough to last through those dry times, through those slow times, and you can. But I think the most important thing is, as long as you're getting communication from your clients, like this for me, like within my industry, I'll get emails like, "Oh, can you bid on this project? Like we're doing X number of focus groups on this topic." I'm like, "Okay, here you go." So long as I'm getting those, then I feel like.
Do you
healthy.
track specific like KPI, like indicators, or no?
I don't. Me personally, a lot of what I do, I should. As a good market researcher, I should.
Yeah.
I track more of the personal relationships because, and this might be also a reflection of what I do.
Yeah, but you know what? If you track personal relationships, if you were to then track KPI, if you're tracking personal relationships, I can bet they're going to be better than people that don't track personal relationships.
I bet you your KPIs are hitting every time.
Yeah.
Well, what I do is because market research is kind of split into 2 parts, which is qualitative market research and quantitative market research. Quantitative market research, I would guess that everybody in this room has participated in quantitative market research.
Explain.
Quantitative market research is the scale. It's like, on a scale of 1 through 10, what do you think of Bank of America's customer service?
I say that every day.
I fucking hate those, Neal.
That's quantitative research, and quantitative research generally involves huge number of people, hundreds, if not thousands of people. Political polling is quantitative research.
I never do those surveys, by the way.
Yes, see?
Never.
Would you like to spend 2 minutes to do this? I'm like,
It's always longer than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, well,
apologize.
I think that's why I don't do it, because they tell me it's 2 minutes. I'm like, this is 10. This is,
Like, you were so nice on the phone, but
Yeah.
no.
I try to do it because I feel like obligated as if somebody's in the industry. But quantitative research, the reason it's called quantitative because it's very math focused. So in other words, like, you're getting like, going back to what I said before, like the NPS research. So let's say on a scale of 1 through 10, what did you think of
the Neal Sandin.
Yeah.
answer?
Oh, Capital Districts.
The
sports and
NPS may have
fitness.
been off air, but what's NPS mean?
I'm sorry. NPS, Net Promoter Score.
Well, that was when Jordy was doing. Jordy, what's the #1 ranked Game Boy game of all time?
Pokemon Yellow.
Shout out.
I mean, I'm not surprised. That was a great game.
All right.
I played that a lot.
Jordy was working on that article. We were talking
I
about
fuck with that game.
About NPS. Me too. Shout out. Go, Neil. Sorry.
So we have NPS score. NPS score is a very common, very simple, it's a very useful score for it's quantitative research. It's basically based on the 1 to 10 scale. And it basically, they measure the people who have they score 8, 9, or 10 versus people who you don't. And there's some math. It's very simple, actually. You can look it up pretty quickly. And basically, it measures how many of your customers or your clients actively promote you as a brand, because that's what you want. You always want to have what's called brand ambassadors. You want people that sit there and advocate for, Capital District Sports and Fitness. They bring it up at conversations. They're telling people about it. That's who you want.
I think I put in our notes for this podcast that I sent to you, but I read this book back in the day called Never Lose a Customer Again, but it talks about
You did put that in there.
the steps of bringing somebody from inquiry to a brand advocate.
Yes.
And how to kind of check in on those things and kind of help like facilitate, I suppose, that process.
Exactly. If you want to see a good example of a brand advocacy, think Apple, particularly when Steve Jobs was still alive. People talked about it like it was a religion.
Found the formula, by the way.
Oh, yes. There he is. Yeah. It's a very simple formula.
Paul, what's the formula?
So
This is NPS.
This is the NPS formula. It's very simple. If 10% of respondents are detractors or negative, 20% are passive, neutral, 70% are promoters or positive, your NPS score would be 70 minus 10, which equals 60. So the passives don't count. It's just your promoters minus whatever percentage are your detractors, and that's your score.
Yeah. And obviously, the higher you go, the better. It's a great thing it's quantitative research. It's a great thing to track. It's probably pretty easy to track if you just go look at like Google reviews and things like that. And it's always something to sort of keep in mind. But that's what Bank of America is doing when they send those things of like 1 through 10. I've never worked with Bank of America, but I'm guessing like when I see those, like what you think of your customer service experience with Bank of America on a scale of 1 through 10, I'm thinking that probably goes to an NPS score. Probably other things too, but that's probably just going straight to there, and they're just tracking that straight away.
I mean, that makes sense because it's a number that they're getting.
Exactly. So that's like quantitative research. Generally involves huge numbers, involves surveys, it involves math and statistics, and I'm not very much a math person. Paul would be fantastic at quant. He would be a great quant guy.
Paul's our math guy in here.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm like doing accounting stuff, and we have accountants and bookkeepers who help us out a lot, but if I'm doing my my end that I'm supposed to do, almost always, I don't know why Paul should just be doing all this, because almost every time it involves hey Paul,
Can you come just make sure math is right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So what
At least it's not for a grade. We're not cheating. We're just
trying to get it right,
checks and balances.
trying to get us paid. Okay.
So I do what's called qualitative research. Qualitative research is, I describe it,
Somebody's ripping a hog or something out there. I don't know what's going on.
They were flying.
qualitative research, I kind of describe it as like the same skills that one develops when writing a book report. So in other words, you're not looking at like the number of words that are in a book or how many times the word "the" is being used or breaking it down by math. You're looking at themes. You're looking at the characteristics, motifs, trends, emotional states, things like that. And you're kind of sort of, that's what you're trying to get out from these interviews. So in other words, let's say if I'm asking about, I'll use you an example, like a CDSF. And I talk to somebody who's a member. I'm like, so what comes to mind when you think CDSF? And they think, oh, it's a great place. I come here 2-3 times a week. I'm like, great. So how do you feel when you come in here? Oh, I feel like I'm going to be, but what does that mean for you? And you kind of delve. It's what's sometimes called laddering. And you want to get to that point where you get an emotional response. So in other words, if I find out, let's say I talk to somebody and they're like, oh, I come in here and it's a burden, it's a drag, I have to go in here and I have to do these, that's bad. And I would write that in the report and like, okay, it seems to be, but if I get somebody who comes in and it's like, I feel like really invigorated, like I feel like I'm starting a new life, I feel like I'm really enthusiastic about what this is doing for me, that's another thing. But you're trying with qualitative research to get that emotional response and finding that emotional response within the interviews. And then when you do the analysis, you're sort of combining these different stories that you're getting from these different people and coming up with an overall story that tells you.
How do you, okay, so do businesses come to you and they think that this is how my consumer feels about us? And then sometimes is that not the case? And then sometimes that is the case?
Yes. Well, that's what you're describing as a problematic interview,
right,
or a problematic problem.
Because I guess how do you first go about learning what the business thinks about themselves? Mm-hmm. I guess it starts there, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different aspects to it. So a business, and this is my own personal take on it. Like a business often, you have the brand. And a brand was initially, I think, I tried to do a little bit of research on this. A brand was basically like, the Old West. They branded their cattle, and right. That was their identity of the cattle. But when you're thinking about a business, it's much more complicated than that. Because what you have, what is a brand? Like, what is the CDSF brand? And to try to encapsulate that in a word or a statement or even a paragraph is a challenge because the brand is different. Like what Paul thinks CDSF is undoubtedly going to be different from what you think it is.
Fucking awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say it's fucking awesome too, but okay.
There's going to be a lot of overlap. Like there should be a tremendous amount of overlap.
I think we had this conversation before. Keep going. Yeah, I like this.
There's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap, but it's not going to be a complete circle. Like that Venn diagram is not going to be a complete circle. It's going to be like a little bit of divergence. Like Paul may view it like this aspect is more important. Well, you might consider this aspect is more important. That is actually good, in my opinion, because it shows you directions that the brand can go, but it also is like you can't carry the whole brand on your shoulders. No. If you try to have the brand be like the Venn diagram of a brand amongst different owners or different employees be a circle, that's micromanaging, and that just leads to burnout. You want to have a significant amount of agreement and overlap, but having a little bit of divergence. And like, so for example, like, for you, I'm totally guessing.
No, go ahead. I love this.
Mike may say like, what makes CDSF unique is that like, I make sure the place is spotless when people come in the morning. Paul may be thinking like, well, I think the programs are going to be like really challenging, but rewarding at the end of it. While Dan may say something like, it's a really friendly atmosphere and like, people can come in here and they talk about anything and they feel welcome and they come in. All those are correct, but you see like the emphasis is slightly different, but all together creates that CDSF brand. Now, if you take that to what the customers think of it, they will also have a slightly different view of what the CDSF brand, depending on their own experiences. But so long as there's significant overlap, the brand is strong. But if, let's say, they think it's like if I, as a customer, think it's completely different from what you think, then you're going to have some problems. It's going to be, and you'll be frustrated, and you'll be like, be coming home at night and like being like pounding the desk.
But the people who are frustrated not see this whole picture and know fully why they're frustrated.
It could be just like a breakdown of communication and things like that. But I also feel it's, in other words, like I feel like, Paul, Mike, Dan, others have an idea of like basic principles. These are the pillars that the brand is built upon. But there are different aspects of it. It's like, in other words, like think of it in a way like a house. Like, you have a house and, you like to spend time in the living room and somebody else likes to spend time in the dining room. And you're all in the same house, but there's different emphasis in that regard. So, but having the degree of overlap, like you're all in the same house, you're all working to make sure that house is pleasant to be in and that people like being in there and that it's maintained and things like that. But if somebody goes like, I hate this wall and I'm going to break it down without consulting you, that causes. So if you bring it out here, let's say if Paul decides that, it's like, we don't need this board anymore. This board is bullshit. And that would go against the brand. And that would cause conflict, and it would also cause confusion amongst customers,
Right.
which would cause greater dissonance,
Right.
and cause problems in that regard.
So now you're stepping in and you're saying consumers are here, you're here, product service is in the middle. Is it all getting along?
Yeah. And so you try to, my job is basically to kind of create that snapshot of how things actually are, and sort of perhaps give a few suggestions on how to sort of bring them more in alignment. The worst kind of consumer is the consumer that already has decided what the answer is. The worst kind of client, worst kind of client.
How do you know when you get people for a focus group that they are the ideal consumer for this brand?
You don't. You should always do more than one focus group. And there's always different types of customers. Like even, just to take this as an example, like I've been here at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm amazed that there are kids here that can wake up that early.
I'm amazed.
Yeah. And there are people that are my age, middle-aged, and there are people that are older in the more geriatric type of thing. And there are people that are in our sort of like college age and things like that. It's the different demographics that you have. And you should be exploring these different demographics because like, let's say college age or post-college, like young, like 20-something athletes, what they want to get from CDSF and what they think of as CDSF, the brand of CDSF, is going to be different from how I think of CDSF. I come to CDSF, because I'm middle-aged, I want to be healthy, I want to make sure I live a long life, I want to make sure that like when I'm in my 70s and 80s, I'm still sharp mentally and physically. But somebody who's in college is not going to have those concerns. They're going to be thinking about it as like, I want to be a better competitor, I want to be, and then somebody who's a kid may have it be like, I just want to be really strong and like impress like, the cute girl, the cute boy over here.
Or the college kids in here.
Exactly. And so trying to create that balance of things and create all the while, like you're accommodating all these different points of view while also making sure that everybody feels comfortable here. Because, you have people in their 20s, you have people like myself in their mid 40s, and there are people who are older and there are people who are younger. They have to sort of be able to like, nobody should make each other feel uncomfortable and creating that atmosphere and things like that. So as a market researcher, like I would not necessarily tell you how to create that atmosphere, but I would, let's say, I'm sorry, this is like sort of a long-winded answer. So for this would be like, okay, let's interview some college age students or college age clients. Let's interview some middle age, let's interview older. Let's have only women. Let's have only men. Let's have only, and see how that works and talking about what they want to get from it, what sort of quote unquote pain points they might have. You're like, oh, I like being here, but Neal really bothers me. This
Every day.
Yeah, exactly. Like I really wish you'd shut him down.
He kept talking to me about this invention that he had for the sled.
The sled invention and all sorts of things. So, but basically my job is to kind of create a snapshot. Now, how do I know if I've made a good snapshot? And it's what I said before, is during the interviews, if I can get people to be open about how they feel on a sort of an emotional basis on it. Because, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second, but if they can sit there and say like, oh, when I come in here and I see Mike, I feel like really enthusiastic, I feel really driven. Or if I see Paul, I feel like I'm in good hands and I feel very confident and secure. Or if I see Dan, I feel like that this is somebody who's going to give me like a good ear, give me a good story, and sort of make me laugh. Getting those types of answers means to me that it's okay, this is valid, this is good, we're getting more to the heart of things. And if I hear things like, oh, I come in here and it's just a slog, and it's, everything's gray. I'm just making things up now, or whatever, and if I hear something negative, then that's something I would also be like, okay, so how can that be improved? Like, what would be the ideal experience at CDSF? You come in here at your time that you're scheduled. What would be that ideal experience? What should it be like? How should you be greeted? How should you walk me through that journey that you go through at CDSF, and finding out like that point. And that's another type of research.
You know what I think about, Jay? I don't think I've shared this. I don't think I've ever put this in like any in-service that we've done. I probably should have. It's from, I grew up, I've said it here before, Neal. Like our dad had us listening.
Hello.
Crack it.
Crack
There we go.
It's a
So
great
my
sound.
apologies.
Listen, no,
What-
but it's a great sound over the microphone. It sounds great.
I tried to hide it.
What's that beer again, Neil?
Boddington's.
Boddington. So yeah, I asked Neil a few weeks ago, like, do you want a drink? He said, yes, please. And I said, what would you like to drink? I'll supply. And he said, Boddington's. And I said, what the fuck is Boddington?
I said the same fucking thing, and then I looked it up and I was like, oh boy.
So
This is
today I
hard
did
to
some
find.
phone calls and Glenville Beverage, shout out, had some Boddingtons in stock. Boddingtons is what, Neil? When did you have your first Boddingtons?
Oh, ages ago. It was somebody.
1942.
Probably. No, my older brother's ex-girlfriend introduced it to me. And she's like, oh, drink this. And I was like, all right, this is good. And I didn't really get along with her. So it bothered me that I kind of liked the beer, even though I didn't really get along with her.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When somebody
pretty
gives you
solid.
something, you're like, wow, I don't like you, but this is great.
This is good.
This is
Like,
fantastic.
It's good, but we don't get along.
But
so
you
I-
suck.
Exactly.
Boddingtons is from what? It's from the UK?
Yeah, yeah. And my friends from the UK have made fun of me for liking Boddington. So I wonder what the reputation is over there.
What
Or
do you
if-
think the US comparison of a Boddington's is in terms of beer?
Ooh, the only thing I compare it to is honestly Guinness, which is Irish.
That's good. I mean, yeah,
But
it's
what
true,
do
it's
you
Irish,
think
but
the comparison is as far as how
It's
they
viewed?
view it there compared to what like would be viewed here?
Oh, I think they view it as like,
it's not like a Keystone, is it?
yeah, like I think
I was
they
gonna
view
say,
it
is it
like
like
sort of
Bud
like
Light or
yeah,
Keystone
like a Natty Light or something like that.
Like I feel like we're being
So it's,
fancy.
like it's a college beer.
Yeah,
I
like,
feel like we're
college beer
being
then.
fancy tonight with the Boddingtons, but
Meanwhile, we're just in
God
college.
forbid there's a UK listening to this.
I don't know. I like again. It was I mentioned. I really like Boddington. So they, and they're like looked at me and they started laughing. So maybe there was some sort of controversy at the time or something. But Boddington's was like verboten, and I did not have, in fact, Boddington's that night.
Right.
I got drunk on something else entirely.
Okay, we're there right now. Okay, market research and companies and beer. What about Bud Light in the U.S. this past year?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's interesting, right? Is that something you looked at? Because they've tanked, right, in terms of
They seem to be. I just saw the other day they are announcing layoffs, which is a bit surprising to me. I was, that's like. That's a complicated thing because that involves social media and sort of that ramping up of people getting a little crazy because a social media star who happens to be trans.
right. I mean, you have
talks-
that like social factor, and then
Yeah.
you have a brand whose demographic apparently is in a different place.
I think I have a sort of an elaborate thought on this in regards to American culture. So America, as the United States, is known, and this is amongst like psychological tests they've done across countries and worldwide. America is the most individualistic country in the world. UK is number 2. So we are the most individualistic country. What I think that means, particularly in light of COVID, is that we've gotten very lonely and very isolated. So people may not recognize this as such. So they might hear me say that and be like, whatever, Neil, and but I feel that they are basically kind of lonely and isolated.
Because we went through these lockdowns, we're stuck to our phones, we're stuck in our own point of views.
And that's based on a foundation of being incredibly individualistic, that we have to do it on our own, that we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, that we shouldn't be asking for help, we should be doing it all on our own.
And we all have friends that think that way.
Exactly. In other countries, they don't have friends that think that way.
But what about you have that with, do other countries you feel have this tribal mentality then, where I'm in my own and my thoughts, and I need to be with people that only have my thoughts and think like me?
Well, that's the thing, because, it's such an individualistic culture that we have. And it's really interesting. If you go to other countries, you see how they live, particularly for an extended period of time, not just a weekend vacation, but if you stay there for an extended period of time, you really see that the differences between American culture and other cultures. But so anyway, people are individualistic here, but particularly in relates to COVID, which sort of certainly exacerbated things. They got more isolated, more siloed, if you will, more lonely. So therefore, where they go to for community, because humans are universally, we're social creatures. So where do they go for community? Social media. One person gets upset. Another person gets upset. And it creates this upwelling of what looks like community. It looks like consensus. It's not consensus. It's just a bunch of loud people.
Well, you have loud people, and don't you also have like bot farms who are people that aren't even real, stirring shit up and egging these people on?
That's exactly what's happening. And so you have, and we've seen videos of bot farms where it's just some like lonely person just hitting a bunch of like 50 phones constantly to like create upvotes and whatnot like that. But I think that that's a lot of it. It's like it created a sense of community to hate Bud Light. And I personally feel it's unfounded. I think it was like a kind of a ridiculous...
I already hated Bud Light way before that.
Like I was never a fan of Budweiser. Budweiser was kind of like the only drink that I couldn't, the only beer that I really couldn't stomach. It was just not my taste. Bud Light was just not my
Bud Light's
thing.
aluminum, man.
Yeah, but it's like, but the controversy, I think, was a sense of creating community, and it's a shame that it ended to be like transphobic and against, and because it was because of this trans individual.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but you're right, Neil. I mean, just think about since COVID or since 2016, how polarizing everything has been. Has everything always been this polarizing, or has
It's funny 'cause I was thinking about this on like
Or
for some reason
ha-
on my way to work today.
or has social media and how news cycles run today made things appear more polarizing, and that pushes people to be stronger? I'm on my tribe, or Neil's on his tribe.
I think, let me back up a little bit. So in market research and in psychology in general, I'm going to overly simplify this.
Perfect.
There's two types of thinking that happens within individuals. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is emotional, otherwise sometimes known as limbic thinking, because that's the limbic part of the brain. And then you have type 2, which is more rational. Type 1 is faster. It's like, an example that is given sometimes to distinguish between the two is like, you go into the garage and you jump back because you see a snake, and then you realize it's a coil of rope. So they jump back and you think it's a snake. That's the limbic system. That's the emotional system. It's faster and it's very powerful. And then it takes time for the rational system to come online and to recognize, oh, that's just a coil of rope. So rational system takes longer, while the emotional system is quicker, faster, and more powerful. And so there's this great band that I really love called The Armed. They're from Detroit. And they have this great line to one of their songs.
Tell us, what's the song called?
The song's called Polarizer. And the song, the chorus of it is, and the video is fantastic, but the chorus is Polarizer, thy will be done. And I think that's like a really insightful way of putting it. It's like that thing that polarizes, that creates that emotional response, people tend to follow it because it creates that frisson, that creates that feeling within you. They're like, oh, it feels good to be angry about something. It feels good to feel this way.
It's an emotion. They haven't
Bingo.
felt any emotion.
Yeah.
So it gives them emotion.
Bingo.
Like
That's
there
exactly
wasn't,
right.
they haven't felt, happy or sad or anything. So they're like, oh, I'm pissed off about this, or I'm mad about this.
And then you have
I'm
a group
gonna
of
double
people
down on it.
that are gassing you up online and saying, I'm pissed about this too.
And it creates that sense of community while you also have that frisson and that rational side of you being like, wait a minute, hold on. Let's see if this is actually true.
Isn't there something to, I suppose, the internet where I could type something to you online that's like, fuck you, Neil, you motherfucker. But I would never say that to your face. But online,
I might say it to Neil.
Yeah.
But I type it in 2 seconds, right? People, they're saying shit online that they would never, ever say to you. If I saw you in person, I'd be like, hello, Neil, how are you?
Hi, Neil.
Yeah. There's also, this is actually another aspect that's, I feel is really key, is that social media is primarily written.
Yes.
And so if you have, let's say, a seven word sentence, there are at least seven possible interpretations of it, depending on where the emphasis is.
Right.
And so it's like, I went to the store, could be, there we go. So like,
I've been
struggling
hearing
with his
this
headphones.
rub against my microphone for like
I know,
the
I tried
last
to
10
fix it
minutes,
once.
and I'm like,
Here,
motherfucker.
Before Neil talks about how these sentences can be interpreted differently, fix that. Give us a little polarizer, Jay. Let the people hear. Let's get to
I missed the artist, or else I would have been playing it already.
The Armed. They're from Detroit. The video is fantastic. They have all these artists from like Eminem to Rihanna to Yeezy and all sorts of things, but their eyes are all blurred out. And so it becomes like this it's like this weird sort of thing of, I tend to view music in a like sort of a deeper way than it's probably intended, but I sort of view it as like how they're sort of marketing themselves. And it's like, and the Armed is like this punk rock band from Detroit. They're like this collective. And I just think that song's like fantastic. It's just,
Yeah,
Chef's Kiss.
Speaking of like trippy music videos, I had a teacher in high school, and Paul probably had him, and maybe Jay, who actually my senior year ended up like leaving the school or got fired because he.
I don't think I had him, but I know who you're talking about.
Because he like fell in love with a student.
Yeah, I didn't have him, but I know who you're talking about.
I don't know any more than that.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
But there were days, I mean days, not just one day, but days.
Multiple.
Where he was definitely like super high every day, but there were days where we would just watch Tool music videos all fucking class, Neil. This was like sophomore history, like it was my English class.
English. It was English, yeah. I didn't have him, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. No, I had an English teacher that like decided that you should sleep. It was a first period class. And he was like, "We're going to sleep today." And he just
That's a great class. I love that teacher. Where was that teacher in my life?
He played classical music and just let us sleep. And then one day he got caught and he got in a huge amount of trouble. But
I would have appreciated that teacher.
We in that class too. Did you do this, Paul? We watched. We never read any books related to any of this, but for 1 week we watched The Wizard of Oz synced up with The Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. There's apparently other albums that you can sync up with it.
Definitely did not experience that. I didn't have him as a teacher. I know who you're talking about. I didn't have him.
But I was like, oh, this is pretty trippy, like 13-year-old Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jordy had him because
No, he was gone before I got
thought
there.
that he was gone before
I
you
was
got
talking about this recently. Somebody I work with, I guess I'll speak vaguely,
Yeah.
was dating the girl at the time that he
Oh my
proposed to
God.
her.
Would I like to get into this, but we definitely
We're
can't
not-
on air. Yeah, we'll save it for later.
There was a rumor about a teacher in my high school too that he married a former student. Like as soon as she graduated, they got married, and it was like, and so my friends who just like,
ruthless.
Yeah, my friends like I should stress like in my high school, it was like mid '90s or something like that. I was straight edge, but my friends were most certainly not. One of them went to jail for drug dealing and things like that. But they would just say right to the teacher, I'm like, "Oh, how's your wife doing?" Like just like ruthless, just throwing it in his face entirely. Like they knew the whole history of it, knew the name, everything.
Jay, didn't you get in trouble? This is past statute of limitations.
Jesus.
Didn't you get in trouble for like taking a picture of a teacher, like fucking throwing a churro?
Yeah, it was a suggestive photo of a teacher with a banana in his mouth.
There we go.
He made the mistake of doing attendance with a clipboard in his left hand and a pen in his right while holding on to his banana. I don't know what he expected.
Yeah, that's sort of asking for it at that point. Yeah.
Wait, what grade were you in?
11th.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a fucking I don't know. For
It's a
me,
prime year for me to do that.
my prime year of being a complete cockbag was 11th grade for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, like when I was in high school,
sucks.
when I was in high school, like I had like long hippie hair and like listen to really angry like hardcore music and stuff like that. Like that was my thing, and I always sort of had this because I was what's called straight edge. Like I didn't do any drink. I didn't drink anything. I didn't smoke. I didn't have sex, but that wasn't by choice. That was just because I was shy and awkward. So I was sort of like I threw a lot of my energy into like music that I listened to at the time. So like I listened to, again, this is like 90s. So, at that time I was sort of done with Nirvana. Like I thought that they were old news. Well, like just to show you kind of like how much of a jerk I was after Kurt Cobain killed himself, I made a shirt saying I killed Kurt.
Jesus Christ.
And wore it around school. And I was
Yikes.
not, because that was the whole thing with the 90s was like, how much can you shock somebody and like go that
Shock value.
And it was totally like absolutely the wrong thing to do.
You know what I watched a couple months ago, and our dad actually worked at this, was the Woodstock '99 documentary, Neil.
God. Yes.
I mean, I was young, right? I was born in '91, so I was an 8-year-old dude then.
It's wild.
I wasn't listening to Korn at 8 years old or Limp Bizkit, but what a wild scene, bro. That's the '90s.
The fact that they thought that was a good idea to have that lineup.
Jay, can you find a Korn set from
Korn's first song on that? You immediately know this is about to be.
Find Korn's opener. Like all the girls' tits are out. Everybody's fucking fighting each other.
So we have a member in here. Neal knows this member that went to Woodstock '99.
Find Korn opener from that
And
song.
I was in here talking to them about how DMX's performance at Woodstock '99 is like one of the most. It's like one of the most memorable hip hop performances ever because of how many people were there. Mm-hmm. And she literally looks at me and goes, DMX wasn't at Woodstock '99. And I was like, there's a documentary on it. There's a whole documentary.
Do you remember that, Neil? Do you have friends that were there or no?
I had friends who were there. I did not go to Woodstock. I did. My first concert ever was the 1992 Lollapalooza tour.
Okay.
The
Who was there?
Lollapalooza tour
was a good.
It was an amazing lineup. You had
Good
Lush,
festival.
which was the first band, but then you had. This is the order that they played in. And there was a second stage that Tool played at. And you also had the Jim Rose Circus Sideshow where somebody was picking up cinder blocks from their nipples.
Those are some strong
Yes,
nipples.
it's 90s.
Yep. Yeah.
But
yeah.
the first
They had
on the
stronger
main
nipples
stage
in the 90s.
On the main stage, you had Lush, then you had Pearl Jam,
Ooh. Yep.
then you had I think the Jesus and Mary Chain, who I love them. They're a great band from Scotland. Then you had Front 242, which was this industrial band that went nowhere. Then you had Soundgarden.
Yeah, recipes Chris Cornell.
Then you had Ministry, which came on with like animal bones on their stage show. Red Hot Chili Peppers headlined it. It was just an amazing show, and it was like an all-day thing. And that was '92, and then that was my first concert that I ever went to.
That's a hell of a first concert to go to.
Jay, spin around the iPad. Play the Korn, at least the opening of the Korn
Oh my
set.
God, dude.
Well, this was '92, so it was like Pearl Jam, and like I remember seeing a guy fall on his head and just getting up and like just going crazy. And like it was actually kind of cool because everybody checked with him. It's like, are you okay? Are you all right? Like there was no attempt to like try to hurt anybody. Like it's just there to have fun. Mm-hmm. But I remember I saw Stone Temple Pilots and the Butthole Surfers at a.
What's their one big song? Butthole Surfers.
Oh, Pepper.
That's a very Jesse lineup right there.
They did not play that. It was the Flaming Lips opened up, and people there, because it was like a New Jersey like suburb, were there like to hurt people, and it was like much more of a different thing. Like Lollapalooza, which had like 15,000, 20,000 people in, I felt safer there than at this 5,000 person show, where like you have people that are like trying to like cause like pain, and like. I remember, like, I went to a lot of concerts when I was in college. My first time I did crowd surfing was with the Dinosaur Jr. show. It was fantastic. Didn't get landed on my head, so I landed okay. I remember first time I saw Green Day, they opened up for Bad Religion. They were opening show.
Whoa.
They were the opener for Bad Religion. And it was actually a great lineup. So Seaweed was the first band. And they're a terrific, terrific punk band. Totally underrated. And then Green Day came on, and it was just when I think Dookie was coming out.
I feel like I listen to music now, and I'm like, when I'm in my car, I'm like pretty much 90s music, early 2000s.
Mine's a variety, but it's definitely a lot of 2000s hip hop that I listen to, like from college and high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. The music I tend to listen to is stuff that like just really is unapologetic. Like if you're going to do a thing, just go 100% on it. Mm-hmm. Don't hold back. I feel like this is my old man talking. This is me being an old man talking, but I feel like a lot of musical artists today are trying to be like Radiohead. Mm-hmm. I'm like, don't be Radiohead. Be like, go all the way. If you're going to write a sad song, be 100% of a sad song.
Well,
if you're going to write an angry song, go like 100%.
But doesn't going back to social media that change how people want to put out their music now? I want the TikTok song. I want a catchy hook. I want a quick snippet. I want a single.
I think that's actually a really good point because like back in like like late 80s, early 90s, you could survive. I'm not saying you're going to make a good living, but you could survive not being on the radio.
You could sell records, right?
You could sell
And
records.
now
You could
now you
sell
can survive
t-shirts.
even more with streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think. What do you get paid per stream? It's not much.
No,
not much.
You get your
0.003.
money on touring now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, on touring for
Right.
sure.
And I feel that I think there's still a little. I wonder. I don't know as much about that industry as well, but I wonder if there's too much reliance on the sort of the streaming and becoming viral and selling songs on TikTok and things like that.
The becoming viral thing, I see it with people younger than us and a generation below us. When I guess I'll take this industry because this is what I know. When I came up, it was I need to read books by people who are actually doing this. I need to seek out those people. I need to try to work with them and do internships. I need to be around them. I need to build my skills so that I can help Neal work out and I can help somebody else work out, right? But now I feel like you have this other avenue where people are hopeful that, oh, well, if I get a big TikTok account or Instagram account, I can just amass this big following and I can just make money that way. But that's a very small percentage of people that do. But everybody, I feel like a lot of younger people are chasing that.
I feel like that, to me too, is you compare it to like a professional athlete, right? Like you want to get into the fitness industry, you want to get this massive following. The percent chance of you getting this massive following is the same percent as you making it as an NFL player.
Yeah.
Like, and probably less because anybody can get on social media. Anybody. Not everybody can be an NBA player or an NFL player or an MLB player. Like, you got to have something special about you at that point.
I think
Where-
that's actually like a really interesting change that's happened is the element of access. Because with social media, anybody can access it. People my age, people younger, like when we were in, like when I was a kid, like in the 90s and early 80s and the late 80s, I mean, there was certain access to certain types of culture that was only for me. Like that was sort of restricted to me. And I feel that social media opens it up to everybody. So like grandparents can watch this as well as teenagers can watch
Which
this.
is good though, right?
It's good, but I think there's two sides of it. That in other words, it sort of prevents, I don't know if it prevents, it's a hypothesis of mine, of the youth of today creating their own culture, creating their own thing, creating their own scene, because their parents are watching the same thing. And because their parents and their grandparents have the same voice as the teenagers do, that it skews what they see. And so I saw this really interesting video the other day, which was about hit songs, or number one songs. And it was really striking that from like I don't know, about 2003, maybe 2007 onwards, it sounded very homogenous. While prior to that, you had huge diversity. Sometimes you had hip hop artists that were number one. Sometimes you had hardcore artists and metal artists.
There's
that were
a
number one.
story about Outkast, about their song "Hey Ya." This is probably 03 or 04. It didn't sound like anything else.
Yeah.
They put it out on the radio and it completely flopped. It did terrible. But Andre 3000, whoever, Big Boy, whoever was behind their album, their song, their group, said, no, this is a great song. It needs to hit. So they somehow collaborated with DJs and they said, you're going to play this song after the number one song and before number one songs. So people hear a top hit and then they hear this song. They hear the song, and they hear a top hit.
And then that song became huge.
And then look where that song charted.
Yeah.
That song ended up being huge.
Because people put it in their mind with another hit song.
Yeah, exactly. It sort of reminds me of a little bit of there's a thing back in like the 50s or 60s, the payola scandal, where they would pay DJs to play certain songs at certain times, and it was a huge scandal at the time. But yeah, like you can play with it in really interesting ways, and that's like sort of like a market research type of thing. But I feel like, when I was a kid, and this is like an old man talking, I'm 46, as I mentioned, and maybe I'm just not aware of it, because it's very possible in that regard too, but having a sort of like a youth culture develop. Is I feel like a different scene today because you have social media, which is open to everybody.
Yeah.
And there's an advantage to having things being open to everybody, but I feel there's also an advantage to having things being somewhat like, no, this is for teenagers. This is for young 20-somethings who can develop their own culture and their own viewpoints and their own aesthetics that gets lost when you have somebody like me chiming in.
Right.
Like I am coming into it with a different set of aesthetics. Like I'm coming into it with like a hardcore aesthetic or a metal aesthetic that is lost, and I don't know. I don't really have a solution to that as well, but I feel like that's sort of like a way of like with social media, it homogenizes society in a way that I feel that is not necessarily harmful. I don't necessarily think it's harmful, but I feel it also stifles creativity into new ways to going about it. Like, because I remember when I was in the 90s, there was terrible design, fashion choices that were being made in the 90s. Horrendous, like giant pants that were like 3 times too size, 3 times too big that people would wear.
You know what I want to get?
Yeah.
I just got a fanny pack.
Yeah.
I just got one.
Yeah.
I feel like they're back in.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to wear it.
They've been in.
But like, and maybe there are like
They've been
pockets.
What the fuck's wrong with me? Go
Maybe
ahead.
there are pockets of cultures that I'm like subcultures that I'm not aware of, and undoubtedly there are. But I feel like social media makes things homogenous, and I feel that is unfortunate.
Well,
because it was fun when I was a teenager to be like to kind of raise the middle finger to like
To be different.
like just do it for a different sake.
Well, and I think music's a great way to look at that, because when you think of, all right, you have, the Michael Jackson, Prince era, you have obviously, the punk rock era.
Yeah.
Our era is more of like the hip hop era, right? Like we were the hip hop era that kind of like, like the 80s was like you had like late 80s, early 90s, you had NWA and all of them come up.
Is that who?
But like, that's kind of where like
Was NWA the first group?
Run DMC was really the first.
No, but I'm saying the first group to have government or somebody put a explicit label on an album.
There should be more of that. Like I would love
I think
to
so.
see.
Look it up. Was it NWA?
They were
More
one of the first
what?
ones.
Pee break. We're gonna take a pee break, everybody.
Yes,
We'll be
hold on
back
one
shortly. This episode of Off Exit 10 is brought to you by Drink Alchemy. Fatigue and brain fog affect us all, destroying everything we pursue. Whether as an athlete, artist, creator, or entrepreneur, our mind holds the key to performing optimally. By combining the most potent organic nootropics found in nature, Drink Alchemy delivers sustainable boost to creativity, memory, energy, and focus in one epic beverage. Stop pumping your body full of excessive amounts of caffeine and unknown proprietary blends from other energy drinks, and get clean energy from Drink Alchemy's natural nootropics like lion's mane, L-theanine, and caffeine from green tea. Used by Olympians, D1 athletes, MMA fighters, and entrepreneurs, Drink Alchemy has become a huge part of my daily routine, making sure I'm functioning optimally during long days of coaching athletes, running CDSF, and getting in quality workouts myself. So do yourself a favor and ditch the energy drinks loaded with caffeine, other stimulants, and who knows what else, and head over to drinkalchemy.com today. Live with your mind unbound and save 10% off your order by using code CDSF at checkout. That's drinkalchemy.com, promo code CDSF for 10% off your order today.
Neal, can you spare one of those beers?
Yes, I can spare at least one.
I would love to try it.
All right. It's not as cold as it probably should be.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Please.
Barrington.
Okay, we are
Literally
back.
The most I've drunk in like several months. So
Yeah, me too.
Can't say the same.
We've peed. We're back. Jordan has a Boddington's.
I do. It says creamy. You think there's milk in there?
I think it's because it's like a nitrogen
Okay.
type of thing.
Thank you.
But I don't know if that's.
Jordan
Sorry.
just exploded his Boddingtons. Neal, did you shake that Boddingtons on him?
This is just the power I have on these things. I admit. So sorry, Jordan.
Jordan's gonna be okay.
All right. So
I saw you shake that, Neal.
it's because it's a little
You
warm.
said,
It's a little warm
"How-"
today.
You said, "How dare you ask if there's milk in Boddingtons?" And then you shook it right up.
But it goes back to what I was telling before. Is like, I was introduced to this by my brother's ex-girlfriend and there's no real reason why we didn't get along. Like, it's just like one of those things that we just
Didn't get
never
along?
really like. like I would say something and she would misinterpret it, and she would say something and I would misinterpret it. We just never were able to like get to that.
You
same.
can say ex-girlfriend, you said?
Yes, it's his ex.
So you can say she just sucked.
I don't think she's like, that's the thing. Like, I remember during the time that I'm like, she's not a terrible person. Like, she's not a bad person. We just don't get along.
Yeah.
And it's sort of,
sometimes you're really just like not on the same frequency as people, and that's fucking life.
yeah, it's sort of like a frustrating time. Like, we could be great friends if only we could figure out why we're not good friends.
This one wire disconnects.
Yes, it's like just such a weird thing. Like where whatever I'd say, like she would like sort of like look at me, like not sure if I meant it a particular way or perhaps a darker way.
Right.
And then she would say something to me. I'm like, oh, is she being critical of me or not? And I couldn't quite figure it out.
Yeah.
So
All right, Jordy, give us the review on your first Boddington sip.
Better than Bud Light, worse than Miller Lite.
there we go.
All right.
There we go.
I mean, I'm a Miller Lite
There
fan,
it
so
is.
I don't disagree.
High praise.
It's a little bitter.
A little bitter. Oh, really? I don't find it bitter.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
It's my palate.
Well, you're
All right, fair enough.
You're into it now, Jay.
Yeah, well, you've committed.
Let me ask, do you like IPAs?
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Then I don't understand it at all because I can't stand IPAs.
So if Jordan was in a focus group and you just learned all that, you'd be like, "What's wrong with this guy?"
I'll tell you true. I've done a couple alcohol studies, which have been taste tests. And the thing about alcohol taste tests is that you have to be really careful. Because even if, like, taste test, you're giving them like a fluid ounce of something to drink. You have to have that at the very end because people will go off the rails even after literally just like an ounce of drink. Because even that small amount, which you don't think it's not going to have any effect on you, all of a sudden they're talking about birds and superheroes and
we were just saying, like, I really now, if I'm at I've learned what alcohol is for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're younger, you drink because it's rebelling. And then in college, I guess you keep drinking because it's rebelling and it's partying and it's what your social circle's doing. And now to me, alcohol is just, it helps me be a little bit more talkative in social situations. That's when I go, I'm going to do alcohol right now.
Sometimes you need a little liquid confidence.
It aids in that. But there's no other scenarios in life where that's happening.
I'll tell you true. When I was living in Japan, I was telling Paul this earlier. Japan, this was back 99 through 2000. It was my first actual apartment. It's the first time living on my own was living in Japan.
Wow.
And I had a very good friend of mine, this fellow, Michael Gallagher, a really dear friend of mine. He's from Northern Ireland, from this town, Derry. You don't call it Londonderry, you call it Derry. And he is sort of like, and again, he's a dear friend of mine, but he also fits like almost every Irish stereotype that I can think of. He like red hair, loved potatoes, drank like a fish. His uncle died in Bloody Sunday. Like his favorite color is green, hated orange, like everything that you can think of. And he was brilliant. Like he was incredibly like one of the smartest people I know. Spoke Japanese near fluently, but in a thick Derry accent. So he spoke Japanese in a thick Derry accent, which confused everybody. But he refused to lose his accent no matter what, because it was a source of pride for him. Mm-hmm. But it took him a long time to warm up to me because he had sort of a native connotations about Americans. Being sort of like uneducated or not empathetic. And one of the things I learned from him is that people in Northern Ireland in particular really did like educate themselves quite strongly on the civil rights movements in America and what's happened with the Native Americans in America, because they certainly empathized with that and they took a lot of lessons from that. But we would go out drinking in Japan, and I learned something from him. Like we would go to a bar and he would literally drink until they had no more beer left to sell him. And they told him he had to go. And this happened not only once or twice, happened multiple occasions where they'd be like, "We're out of beer. You have to leave."
There has to be something, we all know people, there has to be something genetically with how your liver processes it in your body that makes somebody more prone to just be able to drink like that and continue drinking like
It's
that.
it was amazing. Like being with it. Like I would have like in Japan at this particular bar, which was called Slave, which sounds very S&M, but it wasn't. You'd get like these liter tall bottles of beer, like of Asahi or Sapporo beers and things like that. Very easy to drink. And he would have like 7 to 10. And I would have 2. And 2 I'd be lit up. And he would have like loads more. But the reason I bring this all up is because what I learned from him in regards to drinking culture is that yes, you got drunk while you were drinking, but that wasn't really the point. The point was the conversation. That drinking was a way to just talk and I had some of the best conversations in my life with Michael. It's one of the reasons he's such a dear friend, because we would talk about civil rights struggles, things that happen with the Native Americans, other concerns that are happening within the U.S. Again, this was like late 90s, early 2000s, talking about that. And he could relate to it because the Northern Irish people, or at least his family and his friends within Northern Ireland, followed this very, very closely. But for him, it wasn't like he would call me up at like Wednesday night at 10 o'clock and I'm ready to go to sleep. And he's like, "Neal, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know, Michael, I'm about to go to sleep." He's like, "Fuck that. Come on down to drink." And so you go there and I'd be there. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning drinking, but it wasn't really to get drunk. It wasn't to get hammered, which was the distinction, I think. It was to have those conversations, to create that bonding experience and to really delve into things. And he was like sort of a fellow that would challenge you, but would never get belligerent. Like I'd never thought that I was going to get in a fight with him, but he would challenge me on things and I would do the same to him. And it was really wonderful. I will say, however, that my primary mode of transportation in Japan was the bicycle. It is near impossible to ride a bicycle while you're drunk. You think you're going to go straight, and it is impossible to do it. Do not try this. It's a bad idea, but it was just swerving back and forth.
Your balance can't be great.
No. No matter how hard. As I'm riding my bicycle while being drunk, I'm like, this should not be a problem for me to go straight.
It is illegal in the U.S. to do that.
Yes. Japan, it was 20 some odd years ago, so I think
you were okay.
I think I'm okay, but it was I was a mess. But yes, but that was a thing that I think like the reason I bring this all up, it's like an American culture thing versus, let's say, even an Irish or it's like this idea of like you're creating a moment to communicate, like you're trying to create that time to communicate.
But that's the culture, though. I feel like even in Europe, right? You're younger, you're in your teens, you're having a glass of wine with dinner, you're talking with your family. In the U.S., it's like, whoa, no, you can't touch that. You can't have that.
Hold on, real quick. Speaking of like young age and cultures, I just saw Dax Shepard. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. He's the actor,
and
right?
Caitlin Bell, right? Is that or
Kristen
Bell?
Yeah.
They have like young kids that are like 7 and 8 years old, and they let them drink non-alcoholic beer.
Oh.
And then when they go out and they get beer, they order non-alcoholic beer. And I was like, that's kind of fucking
good or not
badass.
good? Is that
but
good
I
or
also
not
kind of
good,
think
Neal?
like I don't know how good that's going to end up
they
being in
like
the
it?
future.
I don't know. Like,
Because beer's gross the first time you have it.
Well, apparently not for these kids.
but there is Kinder beer, or at least there used to be in Germany, Kinder beer.
I feel like maybe that's
It's just very like a light beer, like a very like low alcoholic content. I think, having something be sort of taboo makes it so much more attractive, and you create like this, it becomes a bit magnetic at times, which I think happens in college. Like, people become binge drinkers. I don't know how it is in other countries, but
in the U.S. it's
in
definitely
the U.S.
a big
it's dreadful. Like that people go so crazy as soon as they are in college. And
If you drink like you're in college after college, you're an alcoholic.
yeah,
Like
Yeah, but you're right. It's culturally how it's set up.
it is.
Who did we say the first band with the explicit label was? NWA or
No, it was
Two
Two
Live
Live
Crew.
Crew.
Two Live Crew?
oh yeah,
Uncle Lou.
yeah. Well, there was a band I used to listen to, Guided by Voices. This was sometimes referred to as Guided by Liquor because they would just be like loaded while on stage every single time. They
Well,
were
what band isn't?
yeah, they were sometimes compared to the Beatles, Like you had two bands at the time. It was Pavement and Guided by Voices. Pavement was related to the Rolling Stones and Guided by Voices was related to the Beatles. But Guided by Liquor or Guided by Voices, like I saw them a couple times at concert, and man, the lead singer can do high kicks and like was dancing all around. I'm like, I don't know, I can't do that. Like if I drink like 2 days in a row, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Like it hurts.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, musically, you're a Eurovision guy.
Oh yes. Eurovision is a thing that my wife and I got into, was it about 2 years ago? Eurovision is fantastic. I highly recommend, absolutely should get into this type of thing. Eurovision is the largest non-sporting event in the world. 200 million people watch this show every year. It's a song contest.
Do you have it booked in your calendar? Because I looked it up.
Yes, it's in May. It's in May
Just
every
making
year.
sure.
He knows.
This year it's in.
Do you know the exact dates?
I don't know the exact dates.
So
So
I
it's
got
going to be in Malmo, Sweden this year.
May 7th to May 11th.
May 7th to May 11th. It's really kind of fantastic because think about you as an artist. Imagine yourself as a musical artist. And you're going to perform in front of 200 million people. And the song you want to create, you have one song, it has to be 3 minutes. It has to be 100% full on, whatever it is. If you're writing a ballad, it has to be 100% full on ballad. There's no restraint that could be taken in this because it's 200 million people watching this. And that's what you see. And it's just so fantastic to see sort of the pomp, the camp, the full on commitment to it. And it's just really amazing to watch. And it's also what's really interesting is that if you get more and more into it, you hear about sort of interesting like European politics that happen. Like the Baltic states vote together. The Balkan states vote together.
Because who votes for the winner? It's the general public or there's judges?
There's both. You have a jury vote and then you also have a public vote, and they both have equal weight. So you have the jury vote, which is supposed to be like professionals, music.
And they
music
never know what the fuck they're talking about.
Exactly. And then you have the public vote. What was interesting is that in 2001, a rap artist was the first year ever that they won. I've actually played this for you, Michael.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the
I remember.
Kalush Orchestra. It was a Ukrainian rap collective that won. And then in 2022, which was last year or this year, I guess, or no, was it? I'm sorry. 2022, a rap artist won, which was Kalush Orchestra from Ukraine. In 2023, this year, all the songs had like these rap breakdowns in it, and like really started trying to exploit that aspect of it. But it's really amazing. You can hear like different languages and like different aesthetics when it comes to music because the rhythms are different. Like if you listen to an Albanian song versus an Azerbaijan song versus a Polish song versus a French song versus a UK song, like the rhythms are different in really interesting ways. And you get it's really inspiring because you have to kind of change your perspective to be able to appreciate it. So for example, like 2003, like Portugal had this amazing song, but it kind of sounds like show tunes. It's definitely not my thing, but I could recognize the talent that goes into it. And so like I kind of started appreciating what she was doing and what this particular artist was doing, while the winner was Sweden this year. And she wrote this really amazing like pop song and things like that. While Finland came in second place with the Cha 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 song, which I played.
This is
for
what
you.
we've talked about. We'll play this in a second. But when we first started talking about this, I knew it only as the Will Ferrell movie.
Yes.
I didn't know it was anything past that.
I didn't either.
Will Ferrell is a huge fan of Eurovision. Like
It's probably why he made the movie.
It's exactly why he made the movie. He wanted the movie to come out when the 2020 Eurovision contest was going to happen, but it got canceled because of COVID. But in the movie, because my wife and I are like sort of keen on like the different artists that have appeared in there. In the movie, you have all sorts of cameos from different Eurovision artists that show up in it. But it's still a solid film. Like we watched it without knowing anything about Eurovision. And I was like, I think this is a thing. And so I looked up because the main protagonists in the movie are from Iceland. And I'm like, oh, this is Iceland's artist. And it's this artist from Daddy Freyr. His name is Daddy Freyr.
So it was actually their artist.
Yeah, and it was no. I looked at what the actual artist was going to be, and it's like really great. He writes this. He did a song. He did 2 songs because the first song was for the canceled Eurovision contest in 2020, but his second song was called 10 Years, which is about how much he loves his wife. And super sweet song. It's a very sweet song about him being in love with his wife for 10 years and all sorts of things. And
But you're right. People got to go all in. You got
yes.
3 minutes. Like,
You got 3
fucking
minutes.
go all in. Jordy, tell Jordan what to search for the Cha-Cha Eurovision.
Oh.
And Jordan, tell me this fucking guy isn't all in right now.
It's from Finland. It's Karja, but it's in Finnish, so it has a bunch of omlauts and things like that. But he has green muscle sleeves on.
Once you put on green muscle sleeves, you're like, I'm going all in
I
right
still
now.
think that should be like a bit of a tire that you all should be selling, like to perhaps somebody who gets to the 500 visits or
we give out muscle sleeves.
gives out the muscle sleeves. But Karja is fantastic. He was definitely the crowd favorite. He won the public vote, but he didn't win the overall contest, unfortunately.
Yeah, this guy goes all in, man. Wait till
But
Jordan
he's
flips this
a
around.
rap artist who speaks very little English, doesn't really understand the skill that goes into hip hop, like the breath control and the rhythms and things like that go into it. They may not have the ear for it and things like that. And so he's rapping in Finnish. Finnish is one of the weirdest languages on the planet. Like it's not related to, like it's related to Hungarian apparently, but like nothing else. It's not related to Swedish. It's not related to Norwegian. It's not related to Danish. Finnish is just a weird language. And so he's rapping in Finnish, and we cut it off before, but it breaks into this sort of dance thing that happens afterwards, which is just fantastic. But the controversy is because they feel that the jury, which is again music professionals, didn't appreciate the skill that went into doing rap. And so they think it's just like people talking. And there's a lot of skill that comes into play that's maybe not as apparent to somebody who's like a belter who like sings like these long high notes.
Right.
And so he won the popular vote, but he lost the jury vote. And so in total, the Swedish artist, who's very good, like her name's Lorraine, she's a very, very good artist, but she won, and it was a bit controversial as a result.
We first got into this conversation because of the techno train,
Yes.
right?
Techno Train is, what happened is that Karja, which is this Finnish artist that we were just listening to, there was a little bit of controversy about him because people thought, oh, it's just like Electric Callboy with this other band. And so I was like, I've never heard of Electric Callboy. Let me look them up. And their latest single was Techno Train. And I was like, okay, this looks kind of stupid. And I played it and I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've listened to in like 10 years. It's just, the title of the song is Techno Train, and it is exactly what you think it is. It is that thing, that idealized platonic ideal. What could a song called Techno Train sound like?
Jay, just
know
Google
exactly what's
images,
going.
music video. If you bought a ticket to Techno Train, that's what you would want.
They're apparently playing. I don't know if they played there already. They might have. I think it might be in August, but they're going to tour in Boston, and I am severely tempted to like just go down and see what that's like.
Just for one song.
Yeah, basically, I'd go there and like, all right, I'm done, I'm moving. But I love, like, that's one of the things I like in the music that I listen to is that I want it to be full on. I don't want the restraint. If you're going to write a sad song, I want it to be the saddest song
Like, what
possible.
let's say they gave the U.S. a submission to Eurovision.
Ooh.
There's so many genres here. What would we submit?
It's hard because, you have like things like because in the U.S., like we have different genres depending upon what area you're in. Like, you have country music, you have hardcore music or punk music, or you have, hip hop and R&B. So it could be all over the place.
I have one.
Who would?
And it's the most ridiculous
Neil,
answer.
who would you submit?
It's the most ridiculous answer that I could think of off the
I'm
top
trying
of
to
my
think right now. Paul, you have one?
head. I have, it's a ridiculous answer.
Yes, go. That would be the one that wins.
Lil Nas X.
Little Nas would actually do really well with
Probably a great performer.
Yeah.
He fits many different genres of the U.S. And yeah, I feel like he would perform well at Eurovision.
Yeah.
You wouldn't send Post Malone.
No.
No, so Post Malone is too much of a standard. Like that's like already been.
He's too
done.
Nickelbacky.
Yeah, like I think,
Like he just put out an album today. I don't know if I'll listen or not. But yeah, what is he to you? What does Post Malone mean to you, Neil?
I don't know. I don't really listen to. I don't really listen. I don't really listen to Post Malone, to be honest. Like I still sort of fall back into like my early 20s sort of roots. I still like listen to mainly like rock music, but I do like listening to. There's a great website called Closer Listen that does all like experimental stuff that I really enjoy, but it generally tends to be slower. Like I tend to like slower music, just as a general. Like there are of course exceptions to this, but like where something might be like 1, 2, 3, 4. I like things that go like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I don't really know why, but I just tend to find myself gravitating to that. And letting the artist sort of fill the space between the beats with like, noise or sound. It's a little bit like it's kind of meditative.
Right.
But like when I listen to Eurovision, like it's pure joy because it's just so like there's no restraint. It's a lot of camp. There's a lot of like excess to it. And I just sort of enjoy it as sort of like I don't want to talk down to it as if it's candy because it's not candy. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. But it's just like it's a different genre. It's like it's different change of pace for me compared to what I generally listen to, which is generally very slow music and definitely not something you should listen to while working out at all because it's terrible for that type of thing. I describe it sometimes as like listening to furniture moving and stuff like that. But I enjoy it because I let it allows me to think of new ideas and to let my mind wander.
It can be meditated. It can kind of meet you where your brain's at and then kind of like enhance that.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of my favorite bands currently is this band Nadja, which is it's a husband-wife duo. They're originally from Canada, but they now lived in Berlin, and they have like close to 100 releases, like unbelievably prolific. But it's like I hated them at first. Like I despised, like I just couldn't get it. And then one day I was like, yeah, because it's like, it's fuzzy distortion. It's not something you can dance to. It's like something you sit there and listen to. But to your point, Michael, it's like, it allows you to meditate to it and like think of new ideas and new ways of looking at things. And I don't know, it's sort of comforting in that way.
Yeah.
But I love Eurovision. Eurovision is fantastic because it happens every year. It's like this big event. There's a good mix of like things that are ridiculous, but things that are also like really impactful. Like my favorite artist from Eurovision is this Ukrainian artist called Goe, which does like they do folk songs, but in electronic music backing it. And what's amazing about it, what I found out about it, is that apparently some of the folk songs that they've done are from like pre-Christian times. So these are like pagan folk songs that somehow survived. And that's kind of amazing because a lot of like pre-Christian songs, pre-Christian rites have been lost because a variety of different reasons and historical things, just time and other reasons. But the Ukraine somehow seems to have, and perhaps other countries as well, seem to have hold on to these things. So Goe did a song for Eurovision called Shum. Shum means noise in Ukrainian. And it's this idea of like noise being the god of spring. I'm probably getting this completely wrong, but noise being the god of spring.
Did you study religion in school as well?
Yeah, I studied religious studies, but more like Far Eastern, like Japan, China stuff.
Right.
So like Eastern Europe has been sort of an area that like recently has really kind of caught my attention because Eastern Europe is, when I was going to school, like the Iron Curtain was still up.
Yeah.
So Eastern Europe was just like, oh, that's Soviet Union. And it was just sort of forgotten about. But now that like Eurovision has sort of opened this up, and I don't mean to like sound overly dramatic or anything like that, but Eurovision sort of opened it up to me to where like, oh, like, like the Ukraine has this like really deep, rich history that I knew nothing about. My family apparently is from the Ukraine. I knew very little about that. The same thing with Poland, a deep, rich history about that. My family's from that sort of general area as well on my mother's side. And like other areas like Azerbaijan and, Georgia, like there's like a real deep history there. And there's a lot of information that's been preserved that we in our U.S. educational system, we, at least, again, I was brought up in like sort of the Cold War, the very end of the Cold War. I just didn't learn anything about, I didn't know anything about Ukraine. And it's only been very recently that I've sort of delved into like their history and things like that, and hearing a little bit more about particularly in regards to the Ukrainian Russia war, like what's going on with that. And
how does that end in your opinion? I remember the night, probably 2022, March or April. I don't know when they first invaded, maybe February. Yeah. I remember seeing online Russia just killed all of the communication and internet in Ukraine. Yeah. And you're like, oh shit, here we go.
I honestly, I take perhaps a very predictable view on it. Like Russia just needs to completely leave. And the reason I think that is because I learned about Holodomor. Holodomor is, I'm probably mispronouncing that, so my apologies, is a thing that Russia did during the Stalin era, which was basically like a famine that happened during, an intentional famine that happened in Ukraine. So intentional that they would literally go to people's houses and be like, you're still alive, so you must still have food. Give us the food. Like that's how severe it was. Like Russian agents were coming to Ukrainian homes being like, you're still alive, so you must have food. Give us the food because there should be no reason that you're still alive. Like literally that's what they were saying. And that was, again, like the 1930s, I think. And it was really horrendous. And so like that history and the interaction between the Ukrainian and Russian population and the political system is really deep and complex. But Ukraine is always been its own thing. And I think the only way to really resolve this is two steps. One, Russia needs to get completely out. But I also feel that there needs to be some sort of security for Ukraine that Russia won't do this again. And I don't see that happening with Putin being in charge. Like I'm not political or anything like that. I don't have no political power. But I feel that people in the U.S. may not be aware of how deep that history between Russia and Ukraine is and how awful the history has been for the Ukraine. Like it's really hard to overestimate or exaggerate how it's been. And I know this has been true for other countries. Other countries have been through horrendous things on the hands of, but in this particular case, because it's very topical, it's very current, Russia just needs to get out. And Ukraine needs to be its own place, and then and there needs to be some sort of security that Ukraine could be its own thing. Just like with Israel, you talk about Israel's right to exist. Mm-hmm. Ukraine needs a right to exist.
You know what's crazy? Isn't Ukraine's? They have a president, right?
Yes.
Wasn't he an actor or a comedian?
Yes, he's a comedian. It's actually. What's interesting is because Russia, one of the justifications that they used for going into the Ukraine was we're getting rid of the Nazis. But the president is Jewish. Not only that, getting back to Eurovision, the Ukrainian selection for Eurovision this year, to 2023, was two people. One was Ukrainian, the other was Nigerian. And they were fantastic, really great. Torchi, I think their name was. And it's really great, rhythms, really sort of minimalistic. Really, I think, in my opinion, really sort of forward-thinking music. But yeah, that my concern with that is, again, going back to what we said earlier. If nuclear weapons get involved, then it's sort of a game over. So, but I don't feel that should be a reason to propitiate to Russia's demands. Russia is clearly, in my opinion, in the wrong. They should need to get out. And let Ukraine rebuild and solve its own problems. Like every country has its own problems. Like the United States has its problems. Let the United States solve its own problems. Canada has its problems. Let Canada solve
Well,
its
it's like
problems.
think about the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Right?
yeah.
We go in, try to fix their problems, and then last year we leave, and then it's like Taliban or whoever
Terrible.
right back in. Like,
And it's dreadful. It's dreadful. Like, I think Afghanistan's a really good example. Like, not only the Taliban even existing is because previous, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the United States came in and kind of played a proxy war. It's a mess. It's a mess, and it's going to take ages. It's heartbreaking to know what's happening in Afghanistan right now, particularly to women. I think they're closing all the beauty salons, which is going to throw a huge number of people like out of work, and it's a terrible, a dreadful thing. I don't have any type of idea of how to resolve that. Like that, I'm not educated in at all. I just know that it's like sort of seeing a catastrophe unfold in front of you in slow motion. You're like, I don't know how to stop this.
Yeah.
And I don't even have a suggestion on how to stop this.
yeah. Well, listen, you see, I guess bringing things full circle, yeah, you see things with businesses, right? They're headed in a good direction, or maybe based on consumer feedback, they're heading in a not so great direction. And you got to like bridge that gap and try to keep them steering the right direction, or try to re-guide their ship in the right direction. The biggest rebrand now in terms of any company in the U.S. would be Twitter.
Oh yeah. I think I think Elon Musk is doing a terrible job.
Because why?
I think a couple different reasons. One, this might sound strange coming from somebody who is American, but this idea about free speech.
Because free speech is important, you would say.
Free speech is absolutely important, but it's also important to realize that in America, free speech doesn't mean you can say anything you want.
Without repercussion.
Because there are things such as liability and slander laws. Like you can't knowingly lie in a way that harms somebody else. You cannot say those things. I cannot say, Mike has done X, Y, Z in a way that would knowingly harm your reputation and your business. That is illegal.
Right.
That is slander if it's verbally, liable if it's written, if it's knowingly false. So we do have restrictions on this. This is in the law. So freedom of speech doesn't mean you can just say anything you want to for whatever reasons, because there are slander and liability laws. There have to be a degree of moderation. Plus, the First Amendment says it's about government. The government can't restrict my speech. So the government can't say what I can say or not. And the government, by the way, has violated this repeatedly.
I think my eyes first, I was naive Mike until 2020 when COVID hit. And in New York and owning a business and with gyms.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, okay, I get it, right? They shut you down early on. You okay, it's for everybody's safety. And then it goes, okay, you can reopen. And then no, you can reopen. And then gyms are super dangerous. You can't reopen. And you're like, this is definitely some type of overstepping. Like you can't.
I think what you bring up is a really key thing. And this is a debate and discussion that I think needs to happen. Is that the question is, what is the role of government? Full stop. What is the role of government? Because there is a strong disagreement about what the role of government is, whether you're left or you're right. I have my own ideas on it. My opinion is that the role of government is to promote the market while allowing for competition to exist. So, for example, one of the downsides of capitalism is that monopolies love capitalism. Monopolies always happen during capitalism. And monopolies prevent competition. So the government's job is to maintain competition so that, in other words, instead of having like a Hollywood gym, what is it?
Like a Gold's Gym?
Gold's Gym on every corner, we can have a, CDSF occasionally. it's the government's job to allow competition to exist, in my opinion, to foster competition. And so therefore you're going to have to break down monopolies every so often. This was something that was done during the Taft administration, during Theodore Roosevelt's administration.
Give an example of breaking down a monopoly.
It would be like Standard Oil would be it would be the sort of the quintessential example. Standard Oil was a monopoly and they broke down. It wasn't easy. And it took a lot of political will to do that. But what is the government's role? To kind of get back to that, what is its role? What's its role to me, to you, to businesses, to other countries? And that discussion is absent when we have like presidential elections. So like, for example, like, what is the role? Should government be providing healthcare, for example? Other countries provide healthcare. United States does not. Is that the government's role? Is the government's role to provide education? We do provide education, but it's also very controversial. Like what constitutes the government education? Like what books should be included, what topics should be included, things like that. These are debates. I have of course, my own point of view on this, but it is a debate that should be had. And I feel like there's not a really strong consensus about what is government's role. And again, I personally feel like, you should foster markets, but while maintaining competition, which might mean cutting down monopolies. There's a book, Debt, by David Graeber. It's about the history of debt. And he made a really fascinating point, which I feel is often lost. He says, it is not government versus markets. It's not like you have the government fighting markets or markets fighting governments. They are two sides of the same coin. And he made the argument, and I tend to buy into this argument, there is no market, including illegal markets, including black markets, that exist without government. Government creates markets. Markets require government. Even illegal drug trade wouldn't exist without government intervention. There is not a single one. Why the U.S. dollar, the United States dollar, has any value at all is because the United States government requires it to pay taxes. You can't pay taxes with gold doubloons. You have to pay it with U.S. dollars. That creates a market. The government creates markets. So it's not that the market and the government are opposed to each other. They are two sides of the same coin. And by seeing that and then being like, okay, so what's the government's role within all this is a really hard question to answer. And I think it's not going to be something that could be said in a bumper sticker. Like the government is this. No, it's not that. The government has certain roles. And there are certainly, and I want to stress this, there are certainly areas currently the government oversteps. But I also feel there are certain areas currently the government is certainly understepping, is not doing enough. And I think that more of that debate of what the government does, because what we have now is Democrats think we should do this and Republicans say we do this, and all you get is kindergarten playground talk of, oh, you're socialist, oh, you're fascist.
Right.
And that is just your name calling.
That's part of people being tribal, though. You're either here or you're there.
I think tribal is being a little bit kind to that.
Right.
I think it's just kindergarten name calling.
Right.
Like we have not progressed past first grade in our political discourse. And it's like, it's not just like, what is socialism? I have a definition for myself, but if you ask most people, they'll be like, oh, that's socialism. Why is that socialism? And you'll get a blank stare. Why is that fascism? They'll get a blank stare. What is fascism? I read a book and I did a lot of research on what is fascism, like historical research, like what defines fascism, what is not fascism, what is socialism, what is not socialism, what is communism, what is not communism. And in popular discourse, all these terms are used incorrectly. Like communism, by the way, has one political party. So you can't call the Democrats communists because they are not calling for the eradication of Republicans or the Green Party or the Libertarian Party or anything like that. one of the characteristics of fascism is expanding into new territories, invading countries. Currently, Republicans aren't really doing that either.
Could we ever have a third party that has a chance?
Not in the near term, I don't think. It would be great to see that, but I think our current governmental system doesn't allow for that, unfortunately. I know we do have a few independents, but no, I don't. I would love to see that, but I think our current mindset is very binary. It's like us or them, and so it just doesn't seem to catch on. It would be great to see that, but I don't see that happening in the near term. In other countries, they seem to be able to do it, but in other countries, they seem to have a parliamentary system, which is not what we have. I think our founding fathers rebelled against the parliamentary system, and so we have this system that we have currently. And so, that. So, and I don't want to seem like I'm defending one side or the other. Like I have my own personal beliefs. I try to keep that kind of a little bit close to my chest. But I feel that the name calling something socialist just because we think we should have libraries, or it's fascist because, it's silly in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's crazy times. But yeah, Twitter probably keeps going, or X, or whatever it is.
It would be interesting. I don't know what his financial situation is.
Right.
I think that in the future I know he has a lot of debt. Elon Musk has a lot of debt, and I think this is not helping his brand and not helping the Tesla brand at all. So I'm curious how it'll be in December. I can't guarantee
because now there's competition with Facebook's version of Twitter.
Yeah, with Threads. Yeah, which I'm on. I left.
Yeah, me too.
I left Twitter because
my algorithm is more what I want to see on Threads than what it is on Twitter.
Twitter, I didn't like the fact that I lost my two-factor authentication. Like he took away features that for me makes me feel secure. Like I have two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And he took that away.
I didn't even know that was away. Yeah, we have that on everything.
Yeah, he took that away. You can do it through Google or something like that. But I was just no. And I disagree with Elon Musk on a lot of political issues. I probably won't buy his cars in the future. I probably won't fly in his spaceships either, but that's probably less of a concern. So.
Yeah, no spaceships, no.
I'm not going to space anytime soon.
Yeah, no going to see the Titanic either, Neil.
No, I think I'll probably be going on the Titanic.
Yeah, I'll take a pass on that.
I'll watch the videos online.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that him calling it X is going to hurt it. Whether he can pull it around is another story.
Well, you call it tweeting. That's what intrigues me. So what are you going to call it now? It's that's such a staple in our terminology.
Zeeting?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what you're going to call it.
I don't know.
He said Xing.
Yeah.
Did he say that? Xing?
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
But that's a rebranding thing.
Yeah.
That's a
And
HBO
people will
Max
buy
thing.
that up. That's the thing.
He might turn it around. Who knows? Maybe he'll impress me and prove me wrong. I don't feel like he's going in the right direction right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil.
All right.
I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you.
We
Thank you
covered
for
a lot of different topics.
Yeah, this was a blast. We Jordan got to see the cha-cha-cha,
Yeah.
Techno train.
the techno train.
I'm better for it.
You're definitely better for it.
I'm here to help.
Yeah, man, Neil. So I appreciate you coming on. You want to plug anything before we wrap her up?
No. I do market research, but
643 Research.
yeah, come if you have questions, feel free to reach out. But beyond that, thank you for having me on.
Boom. You're the best. Thank you, Neil. We'll catch everybody next time.
Cheers.
Peace.